a woman I knew in NA had gone off to a clinic in the West Country and trained as a counsellor, and I kept in touch with her, and she seemed to be, getting a huge amount from that. And I thought, well, maybe I can do that. So I wrote off to Clouds, as it happens, and got a job as a trainee counsellor, which was in 1985. And it's been the most extraordinary career, really, because, again, I was lucky. The people who founded Clouds are, kind of very serious AA members, and they're very devout. But they also seem to encourage free thinking, and I never felt punished or criticised if I challenged anything that was going on, because I was very interested to know why certain practices were there. They didn't all seem to me to be helpful to everyone. But rather than being sort of shut down, I was sort of encouraged to comment and suggest, and and we did change the program to some extent, in a much more sort of humanistic, pluralistic direction. So, people are not always what they appear to be. I mean, I think I'm very grateful to the people who founded Clouds, because they not only set up a great clinic, but they kind of allowed their team to develop. They never actually imposed their own religious views on anybody, I think. So that was also very good role modelling for me. Yeah.
And I don't want to really just talk, lots and lots about things you know really, and things you've done really. But why don't we just quickly paraphrase the interesting career, and then we'll come back to some of the early learning that you got from the Clouds roles first, and because you have other roles beyond that, obviously. And so just give us a little synopsis of that stuff. So you start as a trainee counsellor, and you're here at the moment as, I suppose, almost a retired professor or whatever. So there's a journey in between all of that sort of stuff, isn't there? Like, yes.
Yep, quite a long and winding road, I think. It's I got very interested in group therapy. Nobody was really properly trained in group therapy at the time. I got very interested in a particular model, the interpersonal model of group therapy. I kind of studied it, taught myself how to do it. And there was a series of coincidences. I mean, one of the very first things that I realised was that there was no proper training for counsellors. And I got sent over to America to have a look at how they train people over there. And that was also important, I think, that it was me that did that, because I was, by that time, also very interested in cultural congruence, the idea that you can't just translate an American model into a British context and expect it to work the same way. That so
I wish the probation service would understand that, with all its criminal programs shipped from New York prisons. But anyway, that's a whole nother story.
Well, no, I mean, it's a very interesting point, because people have a very ambivalent attitude to the United States. I mean, in some ways it produces this, it's highly creative. It produces, well, all the addiction treatment models that we know about kind of originated there, except for perhaps things like social behaviour network therapy that originated in UCAT. But it's but also people are suspicious of America. They're not English, particularly the English, and I guess the Welsh and Scots maybe as well, are a little bit suspicious of the kind of evangelism of American culture, the sort of certainty and the self-confidence of it. Anyway, the point is that I wanted to translate what they were doing very well in Minnesota in terms of training counsellors to the United Kingdom. And so I built a course in the late 80s and started teaching it at Clouds. And that eventually became a degree course. Again, this has to be seriously kind of condensed. And another very important thing happened around 1990. I was talking about my course to a professor in London, Jim Watson, who was at Guy's Hospital. And sitting in the corner of the room was a chap called Tony Ryle, who was also a doctor and psychiatrist, and really one of the most remarkable men I've ever met. And at the end of my chat with Jim, who was trying to get me to run a course up there, Tony said, well, do you want to be a psychotherapist by any chance? And I said, don't mind. And so he said, okay, go back to Clouds, get them to give you Mondays off, come up to London, I'm gathering a group of people to deliver my psychotherapy service up here at St Thomas's and Guy's, and I'll give you supervision and training, and we meet every week, and you'll get some patients, and you can learn this new model of therapy, and that was tremendously useful to me for a lot of reasons. The most interesting probably is that cognitive analytic therapy, or CAT, is one of the very few psychotherapies that takes the political situation of people into account. That it's very interested in the socio-political factors that bear on people's well-being and prosperity. I don't mean necessarily economic prosperity. And a lot of psychotherapy models are highly individualistic. They assume a kind of middle class stability and ability to kind of function and have goals and make sense of life and have social capital. And we were working in Lambeth, where people just didn't have that and were not used to being offered psychotherapy. So it was really just a great experience. I worked.
And I do know, Tony, and even just listening to you, I'm thinking, I'm leaping all the way forward to, Tony's couple of novellas he's published since he's retired, and how all of everything you're talking about comes through in those stories. So,
well, he was a remarkable man. Obviously, he's no longer alive, but he kind of invented student counselling. In the early 60s, he was aware that working class people were going to universities and they were really lost. I mean, you might have heard of that Harold Pinter play about Nick, is somebody Barton? Can't remember what it is. But anyway, it's the story of a working class guy that goes to university in the 60s and completely falls between two stools. He's neither accepted by the kind of upper middle class university crowd, but when he goes home, he's rejected by them because he's got above himself. And that Tony realised that there was a great deal of people's mental health and well-being were being affected by this, and he set up the very first student counselling service in Sussex in the, I guess, mid-60s. So he did. So
you're describing yourself almost doing three things already by then. Then you're doing some addiction counselling with Clouds. You're running the degree program, and then one day a week you're off learning a whole new world. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I began to get very involved in that world and wrote chapters both with Tony and on my own about the model. But it was all about my feeling that there was an inequality of resource for people in this country. So in many ways, it's what Julian Tudor Hart calls the inverse care law, which is that medical and other services are provided in inverse relation to the need. So people who don't need it get a lot, and people who do need it don't get very much. By the way, Julian Tudor Hart was another huge influence on me, and a really interesting Welsh GP who'd been basically part of Cochrane's drive to look at general practice in Wales and really research it, what was going on, and have patients become participants in research. Extraordinarily interesting folk. And Julian Tudor Hart wrote a couple of really kind of pungent articles which have stayed with me forever. Yeah, so, and I would never have got that if I hadn't met Tony and hadn't been to train at St Thomas's and all of that. So yeah, the fact that I was doing 3 or 4 things probably broadened my, made my work very interesting, and it kind of broadened my perspective.
And you worked for the organisation, the primary one, Clouds, for a long time then?
Well, yeah, I mean, until, in fact, last year or the year before, Clouds became Action on Addiction. It started to not just do residential clinic, but it also did day programs and family programs, and it did this degree program that I led. And it became known as Action on Addiction. And then Action on Addiction was merged with the Forward Trust a couple of years ago. And me being over retirement age, I eventually took my redundancy, and so I'm now self-employed. But yeah, so that's a long career, 1985 till 2021 is you can calculate it. It's 36 years, I think. Yeah, and you know, that was good. That was a kind of grounding. It was an anchoring. I didn't have to move around. That's quite unusual these days as well, to have a single employer for 36 years. Is you know, it's not the norm anymore. So that again gave a sort of stability to my career, which I very much appreciated.